Hi all, Nakey here. This is my drill press. And this is a cross vise a friend of mine gave me. It's an X-TAFE vise with a little bit of damage, but it still works really well. Now this little problem here, which is the top screw, is completely missing. Well, we can't fix that today, but what we can do in the meantime is lock the vise in place with these screws. The lower screw on this vise is intact, however it hasn't got a handle, so I've had to use this spanner to move it back and forward. This is the part we're going to fix today. Let's start by taking a measurement. This mount is 9mm square exactly. So now to find a piece of material. Here's some scrap brass I had from a previous project. It's 25mm wide and 5mm thick. So with that, it's time for the CAD work. Rightio, so let's start by making a new model in ArtCam. We of course have a 25mm piece of metal to work with. Our length requirements, I think we can use about 100mm, will be right there. So the first thing I like to do as always is create a rectangle around the work area. So of course our width is going to be 25mm and our height is going to be 100. And of course, our center point is going to be X 12.5, and of course our Y is going to be 50. So we'll just create that. So the very next thing we have to do is create a circle on the top and the bottom. So this will represent the top and the bottom of the vise handle. The first circle is going to be, I think I'm going to make this one 23mm, so it stands off from each side of the rectangle there by 1mm. So I'll create that. The next one I'm going to make about 15mm, so that's going to be the lower circle. So we'll just create those. Now we'll just center those. So we're going to use our center tool here. Good. Now of course we're going to move the larger circle to the top. And we're going to move the the smaller circle to the bottom. So there we are. Now I'm going to stand the top circle off by 1mm. So we've got a millimeter clearance around each side. So that's going to be -1 on the Y. And on the bottom, we're going to have a +1mm on the Y-axis, and so that'll move each circle in a bit. So next thing we have to do is, I'm going to make a small circle which will really be a drill point, so I'm going to make it 3mm. And this will be where we put our hand on the handle to turn it, to crank it. So after centering that, we are going to have to make the square mount point. So we'll just make a square that's 9 by 9mm, actually 9.1. And the reason we're making it 9.1mm square is so we've got a little bit of wiggle room when we place the handle on the mount. So we're just going to center that in the middle of the larger circle. Okay, that's out of the way. Now we're going to make this vise handle look like a vise handle. The easiest way I think I can do this is by making a rectangle in between the two circles. And it doesn't matter if it's lined up at the moment, because we're going to fix that. Well, now I'm going to merge this rectangle to the upper circle here. So we're going to use our Weld Vectors tool to do that. And then we're going to merge the rectangle to the lower circle here. Good. Next we're going to do something called node editing, and we're just going to delete the nodes that I don't think we need. So there's one here, so we're just going to delete that node and delete this one on the other side. And I think you can all see what's occurring here. The handle's starting to take shape. Alright, so after deleting those nodes, we've got a good handle shape, but I think I can make it a little bit better. All I'm going to do is I'm going to make another rectangle, and we're going to make this 9 millimeters wide and about that long. So when that's created, we're going to put it in the middle of the first rectangle. Oh, we've got a spare one, just delete that. And then I'm going to go back to the node editing tool. So what we're going to do here is we're going to turn this line into an arc, and the other side. And then we're just going to move this in so it lines up with the edges of the new rectangle. So that's what the rectangle was for. It was just as a reference point so I can make everything a little more even. So we're going to zoom in a little bit, and we're going to select these nodes, and we're just going to walk it in so it's about lined up. Now, I'm not making a precision piece of machinery here, so I don't have to be super accurate. So I'm going to just line up just about as best as I can. There's no real measuring involved. It's just done by eye. Right, well, that's out of the way. All we have to do is delete this rectangle in the center, and we have our vice handle. Well, now it's time to add a little bit of flair. Let's get our text tool out, and 3 millimeters is fine. And we're going to put a bit of text on the side of this. That's right, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we've got to position it on the handle here. So we're just going to go to transform vectors, and we're going to rotate it by minus 90 degrees. I think that should make it look good. Let's have a look. Yep, that's good. Okay, very happy with that. Well, the last thing we need to do is just position that in the center. So that's all the CAD work for the handle. Now it's time to move on to the tooling. Well, okay, let's have a quick look at the tooling for this vice handle. So we're going to go around the edge and create a nice bevel with our 3mm 90 degree V-bit. After that, we're going to use the same V-bit to cut out our lettering here, and that's going to be about 0.2 millimeters in depth. After this, we're going to swap bits. We're going to be using a 3mm ball nose piece, and we're going to be drilling the hole in the bottom. That done, we're going to be moving on to an area clear with the same 3mm ball nose, and that is going to start our square off. Now that's going to leave a bit of a curved area here. As a matter of fact, it's going to be a 1.5 millimeter curve on this square, and that won't fit on the vice handle. So we're going to make it a bit less of a curve and use a 1.5 millimeter ball nose bit just to do the profile of the square. And then we're going to be going back to our 3mm ball nose, and we're going to be cutting out our job. So if we go to the 3D now, we're going to have a look and see what that'll finally look like. So we're going to use simulate all toolpaths. Well, there we have it. That's what it should look like after we've finished on the CNC. But before we get started, this mount is actually 15 millimeters long, so we're going to have to make some spaces. Let's have a quick look at that. Well, I'm not going to go through the entire design process for these spaces, as it's simply a square within a circle. But let's take a look at how we're going to cut it out. We'll start off, of course, with our 90 degree V-bit, which will do a nice bevel around the side. Then we're going to go to our 3mm ball nose and start off that square with an area clear. After which, we'll profile the inside of the square just to take out the corners a little more. Then, of course, we're going to cut it out. Except this time, we'll be using a 2mm ball nose piece. Well, let's have a look quickly at this, how this is going to turn out. So that's what the spaces should look like after we're finished. Okay, well, let's get to the CNC and start work. I've got the brass all strapped down and ready to go. And we've advanced the origin a little bit, so we missed that hole that I drilled previously. Time to get out the wheel of pain. So after looking around, we're going to find our 90 degree V-bit. It's a 3mm piece. Let's strap that in, get it zeroed, and start machining. Time to put the CNC to work. Here's something I put together called Can't Kick This Vise. That's the cutout sequence complete. We have our vice handle and our two spacers. I've just cleaned them up on the wire brush. Okay, so now we need to talk about the part you hold on to when you crank the handle. I've got a piece of 6mm brass rod. We're going to cut it to size and drill the hole where that part fits. I'm going to start by drilling a 6mm hole into the vice handle about halfway through so we can attach the part from the back with a screw. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that fit. Now I've got to attach it permanently. So for that, I'm going to be using this brass 1/8 screw. I'm going to cut it down a little bit, and then I'm going to tap it with this 1/8 tap, but first I've got to drill the hole. Drilling into the brass is the easy part. The hardest bit about this was getting the rod aligned correctly first. I always like to use a little bit of WD-40 when I'm tapping a hole. Because this is such a small tap, I'm going to be taking my time and go really slow. Well, there you go. That is the rod attached to the vise handle. I also rounded off the end of it just to take away the sharp corners. Alright, it's time to mount my new vise handle. I'm going to start with the spacers first. Of course, the handle goes next. And I've got a high tensile nut that I'm going to use just to top everything off. Hang on, it looks like we've got a bit of an issue. It seems like the nut doesn't screw on quite far enough to hold the handle in place. No problem. I made this micro spacer out of some 3mm flat bar. If I put that in the front, everything should tighten up nice. All I have to do is nip it up with a spanner, and I think we're ready to go. Well, I tell you what, I couldn't be happier with the way this vise handle turned out. Now I can move the vise back and forward a lot easier than I could before. Later on I might be looking at the other issues this vise has, but for now, I'm Nakey, and thank you very much for watching.